Greetings! In our last episode, we looked at this HXC floppy disk emulator and how it can be used to create physical floppy disks for TRS-80 Model 1. And of course the situation is you have a TRS-80 Model 1, but as with most of the ones you buy, there's no software with it, none. I.e., there are no floppy disks, and it's a chicken and egg situation. How do you get started on this? And we showed how this can be used, that when you get your new TRS-80, how you can use this to make physical floppies for said machine. There is another product now that's called the Gotek that is functionally very close to the HXC, and we're going to do a quick comparison of the two. In all fairness, it's an unfair comparison because my HXC was basically a Rev 1 that was originally released several years ago. It is the granddaddy of floppy disk emulators for general purpose, because this doesn't just work on a Radio Shack, but it actually will work on most 8-bit computers, because it can be configured. There's a configuration file you put on the SD card, and that configures it and tells you what all the pins do and where the pin selects are and what to do with the motor select and things like that. And it let you, well, again, in the last episode we showed the full procedure for using one of these to make physical floppies. The Gotek, I think it was originally designed, it is a floppy disk emulator, but it was originally designed for embroidery machines, which used 3.5-inch double-sided dual density disks. And these embroidery machines were pretty expensive. And when the floppy failed, the floppy drive, the machine became useless, and there was a big demand for replacements. So they came up with this. The software originally wasn't nearly as capable as the one, or the firmware I should say, as it is on the HXC. And it did look a little bit different, and the reason I said it's an unfair comparison is because this is release 1 of the HXC, and this is the most current release of the Gotek. So let's first look at the external differences as far as controls are concerned. This uses an SD card, and this uses a USB stick. Now there is the newer model of the HXC, I haven't really looked at it, but it is called the HXC-USB, and it does utilize USB sticks. So that difference really, I don't even think you can buy this model anymore. So that really isn't a difference. One thing to watch out for, which had me going for a while as I was preparing for this, was the SD card or the USB drive have to be formatted using the FAT32, the 32-bit file allocation table format. But in my case, using a PC, when the PC sees a USB stick that is 32 gigs or greater, it has to format it in a format called exFAT, or Extended File Allocation Table, to have access to all of the blocks on it. And both of these only recognize FAT32. The problem is with Windows, which when it sees a USB stick that is 32 gigs or greater, it will only give you the option to format it in exFAT, which I did and put some files on it, and basically this device would not recognize the USB stick. And I checked things, and finally I went, okay, it probably needs FAT32, but Windows Windows won't let you do it. There are external applications out there that will let you format any stick to any file format, or partition format, I should say. But what I did in this case was I just found a, what is this thing? This is kind of small. This is 512 megabytes. And when you put that into a Win machine, you automatically get the option to format it in FAT32. Other than that, this one has 3 user interface buttons. It has a contrast adjustment for the LCD. This one, and this is just a 2-line by 16 LCD. This one has 2 buttons, but it also has a rotary encoder, which lets you select things, increase or decrease values, and it also has a button. If you push this thing, that's basically your 3rd button. This one has 3 LEDs on it, and this one has a single LED on it. And of course this one has a very small but high-res OLED display that shows a lot more information than this much physically larger display, which is easier to read but can't show all of the information that this one does. As far as connectivity, we have a 32-pin header here that takes a floppy, comes off a floppy cable, but doesn't use the edge connector. You have to have a straight dual row connector on your floppy cable. And here you can see the 32-pin connector. It's got a bunch of jumpers here to configure it. The same over here. And a power connector that only needs 5 volts. Now, as a side note, I mean, this is what the custom cable I made. It has the 34-pin edge connector, card edge connector here, and all I did was I basically crimped a 32-pin header connector into there, which fits into here. But then I found a product made by, I think it's a company called Blue Lava Systems, and I got this on eBay. So what this does is it converts the input on either of these to an edge connector, to, you know, the card edge connector. So what you can do, oh, I didn't see that, this just plugs into here, and then you do not need to modify your floppy cable by adding this, because you can just plug in the regular floppy 32-pin connector. And that's a side note, you don't need it. It's not that difficult to crimp another connector in, but for those of you who don't want to deface their floppy cables, it's a great solution. And of course it just plugs in, so you pull it out, it's gone. So if you have a lot of machines and you're going to use a Gotek or an HXC, I highly recommend this thing. Not a sponsor. So what's under the hood? One thing I forgot to mention was this has got a piezo speaker on it that simulates head movement with a click. So every time this simulates a different track or moves from track to track, this clicks, and it's one of the more useful things of old floppy disks. You can hear the stepper motor move the head, and just by listening to the drive you can usually tell if things are working correctly. Does it seek to track 0? Does it then slowly step in to read whatever file is requested? So this was useful. For some reason they left out the physical buzzer or speaker on this, which is kind of strange, but they do give you 2 of the header pins here actually drive a speaker. I just got a bunch of these off Amazon connected them underneath to the proper jumper. It's kind of bad. I should put some badly mounted. I should put some hot glue on this, but hey, it's just using double-sided tape, and to me that feature is very desirable. So whenever I get a Gotek, this is probably the first mod I do. Other than that, we can see, well, all the stuff coming in, bunch of nickel and dime parts, capacitors. They both have a 3.3 volt regulator because the CPUs run off of 3.3 and USB supplies 5 volts. The CPU used on the HXC is a PIC 4620 40-pin through-hole part, and the only other active component it really has is this, which is a 74HC38. It's a quad NAND gate, very similar to a 74HC00, but it has open collector outputs, and what that means is you can wire or the outputs from 2 or more of the gates together, and that basically, it needs a pull-up resistor because open collector outputs won't do anything without a pull-up. They'll just sit at 0 or basically float, but that saves you putting in a package of OR gates because those can be done simply by wiring it and a resistor. So that's all that's needed to do this. It has jumper settings. Now the one big difference between the two is that this simulates 2 drives, drive 0 and drive 1, and you can basically configure this to you can configure it with different images. You can put a boot image on the drive 0 part and a data disk on the drive 1 part, and you don't have to do any swapping, or you can just change images. Once you have it booted, you can just change images on the drive 1 side. But since when you run format and stuff, it needs to access the boot disk, you still have the boot disk in the slot, in slot 0. And that's very convenient, and as of right now, I don't think the Gotek can do that. In order to make the Gotek more usable, what the HXC people did was they created firmware for it that extended its functionality to equal what this board can do. It wasn't an open source project. I think they charge you $10 to buy the firmware and flash your Gotek with it, which isn't a whole lot of money, but as things go, an ingenious fellow sat down and wrote an open source version of the firmware that made this work like this. It's called Flash Floppy, and basically the procedure is you go out and you buy a Gotek, which really is like a quarter of the price of this, and then you download the software, you download the Flash Floppy firmware and put it on here, and you just saved a whole bunch of money. Now, if they ever decided to give the Gotek that functionality of simulating 2 different floppy drives, then they would most likely be equivalent. But anyway, I'm straying. We talked about the components on here. When we move over to here, we have a surface mount part, and that was originally, let's see, I have that, an STM32F105 ARM processor. It was one of ST's lower performance but cheaper processors, and the tool chain for these is really slick, because you use the Kyle software C compiler. You don't write a bit of assembly language for these things. It has a full hardware debugger built into it, that you can invoke from the PC. And obviously on this thing you had to use an assembler. I'm not sure if a C compiler is available. I'm sure it is, but it probably wouldn't run very fast because this is not a super powerful processor. Neither is this, but compared to this, it is. Anyway, I think sometime when we had a chip shortage, ST decided to increase the price of this by 4 times or more. So obviously, you know, that would have brought up the price of the Gotek significantly. And what the Gotek now uses is an Artery AT32F415, which is similar in functionality to the ST part, but I think costs as much as the original ST part did. It has a few less I/O pins on it, but they've overcome that by simply reassigning I/O pins, and it basically does the same job as the ST, and it has kept the price down. The only other things we haven't talked about, oh yes, this has a decoder chip on here, which is a 74HC04, just hex inverters. And other than that, there really isn't a whole lot else. They both got crystals. Here and here, keep in mind that this part, you can basically run it off the internal oscillator, but it's, I guess, not super accurate when you do that because it's got a resonator built in on the chip. So when you have anything that's somewhat timing sensitive, which a floppy emulator, it's pretty timing sensitive to do things properly, so it runs off an external crystal that this does too. And that's really it. You see the connections here. It's got a 2-wire serial connection to the display, the OLED display, and a couple wires coming out of the rotation encoder, which generates 3 digital bits. And when you interpret those, you know whether it's turning left or right or whether the button is being pressed. And other than that, they are similar. Well, if not identical. Another big difference between these two is the form factor of the PCB. This one, I guess you could 3D print a case for it, but since the display is mounted here, basically this display has to face you. But this is much higher than a half-height floppy drive. So you're going to have, I mean, you could mount this in place of a full-height floppy drive, printing a proper frame for it, of course, but that's not going to be convenient in most cases. Now, on the Gotek, this comes in a case, and this case has a form factor. Let me make that top cover fit properly, which it doesn't want to do right now. Come on, fit, click, there you go. This is basically this form factor here. It looks like a 3.5 inch. It's the same for it. This will fit into a 3.5 inch drive slot on a PC or whatever it is you're using this on. Now, of course, you can get drive sleds that make this into a 5.25 inch footprint, but it'll fit right into the existing floppy drive slots that you have on your machine. And all you'll see is the front, like a disk drive. That is a significant difference. I don't exactly know what the form factor of the current version of this is, but I mean, there are solutions for everything, but this is just very cool because out of the box, it will not only replace your floppy drive electrically, but also physically, with a minimum of effort. So let's at least hook this guy up, make sure that it does what I'm telling you it does. And don't worry, we won't be going through formatting disks or anything like that. If you like watching that kind of stuff, then please watch or rewatch the last episode where we do that, but this time we're not going to bore you with it. We're just going to show you this thing in operation. Alright, I got it. I replaced the HXC with this. And this is also my first test of this little converter board here. I had not tried them. I have a few of them and they're still sitting in the envelope, but let's see if this works. And again, it just converts the card edge connector to a 34-pin header jack. And we got, of course, we got 5 volts coming in on a 3.5-inch disc format plug. So let's put this here. Let's see, we'll turn off the computer. We'll see, watch this thing. Let's zoom in on the display. Even for someone like me who doesn't see too well anymore, it's really a small screen, but it is surprisingly readable. I guess it's an OLED, so what do you expect? So it tells me that we have a TD32-001 file, and that's basically TRS DOS. So now, if I turn on the computer, well, let's gaze at the beautiful display while it's booting. And there it is. Get rid of this light here. So everything is just like before. And everything is on here. So now what we can do is go in and select a different disk image. We'll use the Cornsoft image. Reset the TRS. And which game do you want to play? Okay, we'll have a look at Scarf Man. Another thing I did was I hooked up sound to the TRS-80. Now, it's not much a sound the way you did it on the TRS-80. You used the cassette output port, and you basically hook the right data line up to a small amplifier, and the program just toggles that output bit with different pulse lengths to make sound. So actually, to demonstrate the sound a little bit better, let's run Frogger first, and let's spell it right first. Oh, great. End of file encounter. Let's try that again. Okay. Why did you encounter the end of file? Well, I guess it doesn't want to run, so we will go back. I think the image got corrupted. And there you go. So let's see. Come on. So anyway, there you go. It seems to be working just fine. So since it didn't want to boot the Frogger image, let's try another image. And that is, we're going to try an image called Big 5. Reset this. Have a look at what's on here. Lots of stuff. So what do you want me to play? I don't know. Defense? Okay. Oh, you got to go into basic for that. They just have to make it difficult for you. Can't we just find something that just executes off disk? So, Nova. And there you go. I'm trying to remember what this was. Supernova. Press enter for instructions. Oh, this is Asteroid. Press clear to start game. I probably won't be able to play this on the keyboard, but let's try it anyway. Number of players. Oh, come on. I don't remember. I didn't pay attention. And this doesn't have sound. So let's read the well, let's just play something else that has more obvious controls. Robot. Let's see what that does. Okay. Don't you love the smooth scrolling and the high-res large characters? Come on, let me click through this. Okay. Oh, it's worth the wait. Definitely worth the wait. The human race is counting on you to invade the space station and conquer the robots. Come on. Utmost in secrecy. Its code name is... Ta-da! So they're doing 1-bit speech on this thing. And of course it helps when it says robot attack on the screen, because then you know what he's trying to say. Some of the 1-bit speech is if they don't give you hints on the screen what it's supposed to be, you can't really understand. But, jeez, man. What do you got to do here to play this? Oh, there you go. What? Yeah, great. Okay, sorry guys, I don't know how to start a game on here. Oh, yes I do. Come on. I don't know how to play this. Well, player one. Oh, there. Ron, look at his little feet. They're so well animated. Well, anyway, and so on and so forth, but yeah, at this point, what is my recommendation? If it weren't for the 2-disc image emulation on the HXC, I mean, even with that, unless you need to have 2-disc images available at all times, I would definitely say use Gotek. It's cheaper and it does have a faster processor, and it is, I mean, this firmware is actively supported even though it's open source, done by a single guy. He's very responsive on all the forums and everything and keeps updating things, and I've seen conversations between him and people who were trying, thank you, which were trying new 8-bit platforms that didn't work, that didn't have enough options for, and I could see that basically in real time he was solving the problem, even though he didn't have the machine that they were trying to get to work with the Gotek, but he would just create new firmware, send it to whoever was requesting new compatibility, and then they would basically report back and tell them if it's working or not, and if it wasn't, why it wasn't. So yeah, this is kind of cool. Let's see, does it talk? No, it doesn't. So, okay. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. And one of the upcoming things we will do in one of the next few videos is, another thing I haven't showed you is I have a hard disk emulator for the TRS-80. I don't have it running yet on the Model 1, but it does run on the Model 3. That's very cool. So be on the lookout for that. See you next time. I do have some extra closing remarks. I reviewed the video footage, and I keep giving the wrong number of pins for floppy interface. At some places I say 34, and in a lot of other places I say 32 pins. For the record, it is 34 pins, so disregard the 32. And also I think I figured out why Frogger wouldn't run. And I think it's because I played it a couple of times before filming, and what happened was I kept getting high scores because the high score table was blank, so no matter what I did, I got a high score. And it looks like it tried to write it back to the original image, the game image, and messed up the file, or actually the entire image got messed up because it just wrote data and then started writing stuff to the directory for the increased size, I guess. It's appending it to the original executable, and that just did bad things. So let's have a look at it now, because it has such excellent music. I feel compelled to give it one more try. Isn't that just fantastic?